Let's talk about your numbers. I just had a wonderfully frustrating call with somebody who was telling me a story about school owners who are still on a quest to find the Holy Grail of business. You know, they're still looking. They're calling this service and calling that service. And let me tell you that, let me try to bring up an elite team. Okay, so I'm on the board of directors of an educational funding company. It's 1991. I'm sitting at a table with Steve LaValle and Dave Kovar and Keith Hafner and Stephen Oliver and all the board of directors. And there was a huge distinctive line between those who knew and those who were still looking. And this group knew. When we had a seminar and people would come up and they'd ask these questions, we would look at each other, and the nonverbal communication was, well, how many times are we going to have to teach this? I mean, this is not rocket science. There's still a huge line between those of us who know and those who are still looking and don't know. So let me tell you now, again, what we know that you need to know to make your school functional and profitable. Okay, are you ready? Number one is that you have some amount of money that you must make. It's determined by your goals and ambitions. You have to determine what that is and what's realistic. And that should be based upon your needs. Not just your immediate needs or your personal needs, but your long-term needs and the needs of your students, your staff, and your facility, and so on. So determine what that is. And that's going to be a number. And that number is going to be $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 a month. So determine that number. Once you know that number, and it will change over time as you grow up, as you absorb more costs or are able to cut expenses, but right now you can figure it out, and that is a number. What is that number? That number, very simply, is divided by the amount of days in a month. And not just the amount of days, but the amount of working days. So if you have to do $30,000 a month, you've determined that that is the number that pays the bills, that puts the money in a retirement fund, that does whatever it's supposed to do. That's the number. Then divide that number by the amount of working days. Now you know how much you have to make every single day, working day of the month. Is that a mystery? You can figure that out, yes? Well, then you're far ahead of the game, because it seems like most people just cannot get their head around that aspect of it. So that being done, let's go to the next thing that you must know, that we know that evidently a lot of people don't know. You have a finite amount of ways to make money in your school. A finite. It's not infinite. You have a finite amount of ways to make money. Let's name some of those ways. First of all, you should know what those ways are. There's retail sales. Now that's a given. There's new member enrollments and their down payments versus their monthly tuition. Those are kind of two areas. I get this much down. I've got this much coming in and there. I've got renewals. I've got recurring student fees. I've got special events. I've got private lessons. We've got birthday parties or whatever it is you do. It's a finite amount of ways, not an infinite way. There's just an X amount of number of those ways. Whatever your daily gross revenue is that you have to generate based on your long-term big numbers, you know, I have to make this much a month, comes down to this much a day, you're going to figure out what amount of income has to come from those ways that you make money. So if new students is one of those ways, you have to know how much of that money, if I have to make $1,200 a day, how much money is going to come from new students? How much is going to come from retail? How much is going to come from special events? So now that you have your finite amount of ways that you make money in your school, you have to ask yourself and look at the people who help you, what are we doing to affect those numbers? And then you do it, and you keep playing with it. If I have to affect how much retail money we're bringing in from retail sales, then how often are we changing the displays? What sales are we running? How are we building retail sales into our curriculum? Are the instructors on the floor connected at all to what we have to do? Is Instructor John looking at Sally, who doesn't have her mouthpiece, and letting her fight anyway? Even without a mouthpiece and what what could happen, or is he sending her to the front desk to get the new mouthpiece, which is affecting the retail sales? And do we have a process at the front desk to give somebody a mouthpiece and automatically bill their parents? Because we will not allow them to fight without a mouthpiece. You just have to have one. If you don't have one, it gets replaced. You have to pay for it. I mean, is there a process there? There's always something that you can do to affect that. Special events, are we scheduling them? Are we advertising them properly? Do we have posters up? Have we called everybody in the school? Do we have an ongoing blog about it? Are we building excitement on the floor? I mean, there's ways to affect these finite amount of ways that you make money. That money meets your daily goal, which meets your monthly goal. Is that a mystery? Now, Steve and Dave and Steve LaValle and Keith Hafner and all these guys, we would look at each other, and it's given knowledge that that's what has to happen. But we'd be sitting in a room of other people going, well, we're not making enough money. But this is not a mystery. Just figure out what that is. And then the questions you ask when you know that are different than the questions you ask when you're unaware of that. Now, here's another thing that we know that you don't know. And maybe you're watching this and you say, hey, I know that. Well, good. Then you're ahead of the game. You're one of us. But if you don't know it, let's learn it right now. If you're going to run a school, you're going to be a numbers person. And it doesn't matter if you're a numbers person or not a numbers person. You are going to be a numbers person. If you're going to fight in the ring, you're going to be a fighter. If you don't ever want to step in the ring, you don't have to be a fighter. But you're in the ring already if you run a school, so you're a numbers person. And one of the smartest things you can do in your school, and what was done at the Junri Institute, what was done at Ernie Reyes West Coast, what was done at Tom Callos' school, is every week, all the staff met, and we put the numbers up on boards. If we had multiple schools, it was multiple, lines. If it was one school, you operate your school from those numbers. You are either below what you need to be at where you have to be at, or above what you have to be at. It's not a mystery. Those numbers come down to a certain amount every day. If you're behind, you all scratch your heads and think, what can we do different? Or are we panicking? Is there some reason we're behind that is out of our control? Or are we expecting an influx of new business? Will we be at even? And by the way, when it comes to numbers, the longer your viewpoint on the numbers, the more sense they make. I like the advertisements where guys say, well, I was making $18,000 last time, and then we went to $180,000. Well, that's amazing, but that's a short-term freak incident. Let's look at the 5 years of your numbers. Then we know the low times balance off with the high times, and we find the average. Do you know, and does everybody in your staff know, who the best retail salespeople are in the United States as far as martial arts schools? How about the middle group? Are you comparing yourself to anybody? Does the instructor on the floor of your school know statistically what your numbers are in retail sales, and do they have any idea of how to affect those numbers? That's what you learn when you train your staff from the numbers you put on your wall every week. Everybody becomes familiar with it. Everybody feels connected to them, and everybody starts asking the right questions. What can I do to affect these numbers? Because the worst thing that can happen is when you have people on your team who go, that's none of my business. I'm totally disconnected from that. You know why? Because they still get paid and they still eat, regardless of whether they perform or not. And that's something the owner doesn't get to do. You don't eat if you don't perform. And when you start having staff members who are totally disconnected from the numbers, have no idea what they do and how it affects this, positively, negatively, or not at all, you end up with a dysfunctional situation. So there's other things you have to know, but let's go back over the basics. What do you need to make? Break it down into daily things. Find out how you make money. Figure out how to affect those things. Get your numbers up on a board. Compare them over a long term, and then they're almost meaningless unless you compare them to other people. So when Steve and Dave and all of us would meet, we'd put our numbers out and we'd compare numbers, and that's how we learned. And if you hear about somebody doing phenomenal numbers, you investigate it. And if they've got integrity and you like the process and you believe in it, you think you could implement it, you're going to learn something from it. A lot of people do phenomenal numbers, but it's a freak thing, or they do something that you would never do. It's totally outside of your comfort zone, and you wouldn't do it even if you made twice what you make today. You've got to make sure that it's integrity-based. Okay, that's been my little rant this morning about business. If you have any questions about what you ought to know that you don't know, of how to increase the quality and quantity of your business, would you please stop wasting your time and just call me? I'll do the best that I can to fill you in. And let me give you a secret that we never tell the people who don't know that I'm going to tell with you now. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm sorry, guys, Keith. I'm going to tell them. I'm just going to tell them. All of us have exactly the same information, give or take a little bit. Fred Mertens, EFC, Tom Callos, Steve LaValle, we all say the same things because the science of running a school from numbers never changes. The formula is always the same. If you're going to hear something different, it's about long-term strategies. It's about quality of education. It's about mission. But it's not about these numbers because the numbers don't lie and they never change. And it's all down to math. The secret that I'm not supposed to tell you, that I'm going to tell you right now, is that all you have to do is find somebody or a team of people that you respect enough to listen to. Because they're all saying the same things. The reason you don't listen to me or listen to Oliver or listen to Hafner or listen to Fred is because you don't respect them. Because you don't listen to people you don't respect. Go find somebody, for whatever reason, that you respect enough to listen to, and you'll hear exactly the same things that I just told you. Okay, sorry guys, I had to share that. And I hope that this somehow helps you to clarify a path so that you can sit at the table with the people who know. Because when you know, there's no mystery. You just go back and work on the specific basics. How many calls am I getting? How many calls into intros? How many intros into firsts? It's not a mystery. The hard part is cultivating a sense of mission that inspires you and everybody around you to peak performance. The numbers, that's easy stuff. Numbers on the screen.